Ladies and gentlemen, today we have our study session. This is with Plant Moran, and it's for water and sewer rate analysis. Plant Moran, would you like to start?
Thank you so much for having us once again. This is Martin Olenek. I'm the engagement partner on the agreed upon procedures. Nikki Acho as well has called in. She'll be chiming in throughout. I believe a few days ago, about a week ago or so, you received the template, the draft from Mr. John Selmy. I provided that same template late last week, which was identical to the previously provided version other than the draft watermarks were removed. And in that template, what I was going to just provide kind of high level items and then kind of open up the mic for questions. In that template, one of the first attachments shows the cash available with the target reserves, what's needed at the end of 5 years. And basically the template does have 4 different scenarios that I wanted to highlight. And the first scenario, and it's Appendix 1 for those that have the copies in front of you. I'm happy to share my screen if that's easier, by the way, too.
Please. Yeah, why don't you do that?
I'd share it.
Okay. So it says it's disabled right now for me. Whatever is easiest. So right now it looks like it's disabled, but basically it's Appendix 1 that shows the different scenarios. And the biggest costs for the water and sewer fund are the construction projects that are anticipated for the upcoming years. The construction projects, there's a few, so basically it's CSO L41, 42, and 43, as well as meter upgrade. And so the scenario 1 shows all these projects being completed through the issuance of capital improvement bonds of about $25.7 million with payment terms over 20 years and 2.5% interest. And if that scenario was going to be implemented by the city, the average rate increase this year would be 6.93%. The other scenarios in Appendix 1 show construction costs for CSO F41, 42, and 43 having bonds being issued. However, the meter upgrades being funded through operations. That shows 8.9% roughly increase. However, in year ended June 2022 and 2023, the fund would actually be negative cash. Would have to borrow money from another fund or other sources.
Say that again, Martin, if you would.
No problem. So the scenario 2, if you were going to fund the meter upgrades yourself and just do bonds for the other CSO improvements, you would not have enough funds in the year 2022 and 2023. You would actually run negative in cash in the water and sewer fund. So therefore, you would have to use other sources. So you probably have to borrow money from another fund, general fund, for example, and have to pay interest or something to that extent.
But if we bonded for the whole amount, we wouldn't have that negative cash, correct?
That is correct.
So, thank you.
Scenario 3 shows everything being funded through operations, which puts you at negative cash next year. So I don't see that being, unfortunately, a way to be able to do that. And it does show increases in rates of 11.5%, unless you had a really significant increase the first year to try and avoid negative cash, but that would have to be extremely significant. And then scenario 4 is construction costs for CSO L41, 42, and 43 based on the issuing bonds just for that project and no meter upgrades. So that's doable, but again, wouldn't have any meter upgrades, and that would show an increase in rates of 6.1%. So those are the main scenarios. The overall model does plan out and does map out all the capital outlay that's been requested by the city water and sewer department. That's in the appendix 2 if you wanted to see all the details of what's been requested. And I would have to say that, just overall looking at the model and what's driving the costs, clearly water and sewer, water purchases and sewer disposal are significant charges, significant expenses to the city. And then the other major component of expenses are the capital outlay expenses that are in the appendix 2.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, I didn't hear. Was it me?
Councilman Muscat and then Councilman Bell
Okay,
second.
go ahead.
Martin, how do these numbers look from last year's 5-year projection?
Actually, last year's 5-year projection, let me double check, but it was about 6.7% water and sewer rate increase that was projected.
And that's with no bonds and no meter upgrades.
We actually, the city was projecting bond issuance in last year's model, and the bond payments starting, believe next year in 21 in that model. So it was already built in. It just didn't come from, the bond council or anything like that. We were using a projection based on present value of, and doing a future value of, the interest payments and how much that would be and all that. So we had software that was able to calculate, and it was actually pretty close.
So if we went with any of these scenarios, come the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th year, we could be even higher on our rates.
So the way it's projecting out, you would have increases. So scenario 1, for example, the 6.93% water and sewer rate increase, you would be projecting out the same kind of water and sewer rate increase in next year as well in 22, 23, and 24. So each year you would have like a step up increase, like not step up, but same increase every year. But if you did scenario 2 or 3, those increases would have to be higher because you're not bonding for as much. And then scenario 4 is actually slightly lower because you're bonding for less, but you're also not doing the meter upgrades.
And so how important are these meter upgrades? How desperate are we that we have to have new water meters?
I'll have to defer to Mr. John Selmy on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, like I said in earlier meetings, the meters are, meeting their life expectancy. They're, rounding upwards of 30 years. So if option 4 was the more palatable option, at some point you still got to think down the road here on how you're going to fund the meter program. So either you start funding it with a set aside amount. We had some estimates of around 9 million. So if you did, at 3 million a year and look out 3 years to do your meter program, but at some point you got to start setting aside some money for this capital outlay if you don't want to do it all at one time. So, but we buy our reading equipment over the internet. It's used equipment. Most of the software and that is not supported. A lot of the hardware is not. Before I got here, you bought a lot of that reading equipment from other communities that were upgrading. So at some point it's going to be critical, probably sooner than later. And the other big benefit, in my opinion, is that the customer service portion of that, where you can create dashboards and apps and things of that nature where your customer can see their daily use, their hourly use. I mean, has a lot of value. It's not just the meter itself, it's how the data is collected, how it's analyzed, and how it's given back to the residents.
One more question, if you don't mind, Council Chair.
Okay, Councilman.
If we do bond for the meters, that's going to be a fixed cost. Are we going? How fast can we do this change? Because if we're going to project this over, say, 3 years, is the money going to change every 3 years? The cost, it's going to keep going up and up for labor cost or whatever in the next 2 years. So I want to keep it capped at a certain amount of money, and that's it.
Yep, that's a fair question. What, if you try to fund it for 3 years out, is it going to be 9 million? I don't know. It could be 11, or maybe it's 7, but you can only go by today's numbers, and the way things go in our world, things don't seem to ever cost less.
And a contractor would be doing that job, correct?
Oh, yeah, that's correct. And that would be it's a big undertaking. It would probably be a year, 18 months, and maybe even close to 2 years to complete the whole city.
So we would have
it's a huge undertaking.
Find a contractor that says, okay, I'm going to do this for X amount till the city is done, is what I would like to see.
Yeah, so when we met with 4 vendors a while back to vet it out. There's some different types of collection systems out there that everybody has a little bit different type of thing. So, that's what these companies do. They sell the meters, they have install programs. They've got it down to a science, but the big thing too is, being able to get in the home, that, that's sometimes can be a challenge. And then the other thing is, people don't want to change their meter because it's, it reads from the outside to a computer, to a collection site, right? So people like to say smart meters. These aren't, the system that I would recommend is basically the same thing you have now, a meter, a hardwire to the outside to a battery, which actually then communicates outside the home to a collector that sends it to a server, and then that's how we get the information.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bella?
Okay, so a couple of these questions are for Martin. Number one, and I'm not sure if this first question, if it's really for Martin or really for administration as a whole. We had voted as a council, and I know some agree, some disagree with it, and I know even administration had some disagreements with it, but nevertheless, as a body, we decided to have a rate decrease. Whatever happened to that? So let's start with that first question, because this is like completely nowhere in here. In this case, we have an increase. Can anybody from administration answer that?
Let's unmute the mayor, please.
I'll answer. It was never implemented. That's the bottom line.
And I realize that, but we voted to implement it, and it's not a choice for administration to just say, oh, we're just not going to implement it, because we voted to implement it.
If I might respond to that, after the motion was made, we were unclear as to how to follow the motion. And the reason was because we didn't know the way it was worded. It said to reduce water rates. So there's 2 components to the bill. There's a water component and a sewage disposal component.
Correct.
Was the motion 10% off both, 10% off water, 10% off sewage disposal? Consequently, Linda asked me about the fact that she was unclear as to how to reprogram it. So Linda sent a email to the council chair asking for clarification so we would be able to implement it. We never heard back from any of those emails.
That email should have been sent to the person who wrote the resolution, because they were the ones that knew exactly what it meant. And instead of going through a third party who might misinterpret it, the correct way would have been to send it to whoever put that on the agenda.
Well, I disagree, but the fact was nobody ever got back to us.
Okay.
Same old story.
I disagree honestly with how this has been handled, quite frankly. I don't agree with how this has been handled, because we voted on it, so it should have been a much better technique than this, than saying I didn't hear from nobody, then suddenly it just goes away. But we'll move off of that.
If I can say one more thing, in due respect, Councilman, is the fact that there is no way that if we had reduced everything by 10%, we would not have been able to pay our bills.
It was for 2 months.
And I get that, but I don't get at the same time, Mayor, I get that particular thought process, and that's fine, that's within your right. But I don't get how it wasn't implemented just based on you thinking this is not a good idea. It just, that doesn't make sense.
No, if I had gotten clarification from the council and we thought the leadership of the council was who to direct it to, and there was more than one request made, we never,
Right.
and I mean, I can't read minds. I don't know what the motion was, it was unclear.
Okay. I'll move off of that. I just want to, I don't want to say clarify that, but just really more make a statement that I think what happened is not right personally, because we voted on it. Number two, this question is for Martin. We have rate increases at almost every single scenario. Is there rate increase due to the fact that Great Lakes Water Authority has raised the rates on us, or is that only to be able to pay this back? Can you get that clarified if you don't mind, please?
So the water and sewer rates on page 3 of the large attachment, the water and sewer rates are increasing about 4 to 5% per year.
Okay, so we're adding an additional percentage to be able to make up for the costs?
So there's some of that, but then just the volume of the capital outlay that's being requested, that needs to be funded from somewhere, and that's where the increases are
Additional
coming
percentages.
from. Yes.
Okay, and then the last question for you, Martin, Council Chair. Why do we have so much cash reserves on hand for the water? Why do we need that amounts? If you look at the amounts here, I mean, they're quite a bit. Obviously, you know, we're looking at different funds of 13 million, 5 million, and we're starting out with 13,708,446. Why do we need so much reserves on hand, being that we are a little tight as far as money is concerned right now?
Yeah. So on page 1, where it shows cash available, there's a calculation of where your target reserve should be, your target cash. And basically at the end of 5 years, the total is $6.9 million. And it does sound like a lot of money. The 6.9 million, it shows a calculation of how that's done. And essentially what it is, it's looking at your cash expenses for the year, which for this past year, it's about $17 million. And it's calculating about 25% of that, which is 4.3 million. That gives you 90 days worth of cash to pay for salaries, repairs, for water purchases, sewage disposal, etc. Then you also need some money for capital outlay. So one for repairs and for other things, and that's calculated based on just how much your fixed assets are in total, which the system has almost $96 million in fixed assets, which you can just imagine. I mean, that's a significant dollar amount. So if there's breaks in the system, things like that, the city should have some money set aside in case there's emergency. So that's about $2 million. And then there's another reserve of about 500,000. So in total, that's how it comes up to 6.9. Honestly, it's up to the city and the council to decide what that necessary reserve is at the end of 5 years. As of June 30th of 2020, Councilman Abdallah, you mentioned the $13 million, but based on the model, you're going to utilize or use a significant amount, actually $8.3 million worth of the cash balance for this coming year if this budget is approved based on the capital outlay needs of the city. So there's a significant number that's being expensed in the first couple of years.
But then when you go to 2021, you're at 9.1 million. And then when you go to 2022, you're still at 5.7 some million.
Correct.
So how are we starting, if we're starting at almost 14 million, it just seems like a lot of money to have in reserves, for me, at least. I mean, obviously I'd like your expertise on this, but it seems like a lot of money, because if you look at where we're targeting, our ultimate target is for funds available on June 30th, 2025, and that's at 6.993 million. That's our ultimate target. We're starting at almost 14 million. So if our ultimate target is at maybe 40%, about 40% less, why are we starting so high? Why can't we use that money for something else or lower the water bills for the residents?
Yeah, so if you look on page 7 of the big file, Department 537 has all the capital outlay for the next couple of years, and you can see the significant number of expenses per capital outlay, and that's the main reason, that's the main driver of how you're going to consume that cash over the next couple of years. So 13 million sounds like a huge amount, and 13 million to someone like me means I'm retiring on the beach somewhere. But $13 million for a fund the size of the water and sewer fund for the city of Dearborn Heights, honestly, with the repairs and with the aging system, it can be utilized pretty quickly, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Oh, okay. I've got Councilman Constant Councilman Wenzel, and then Councilman Bazey, and then Councilman Muscati. Go ahead, please. I have Councilman Constant. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question or a couple questions for either John Selmy or Dan Brooks. How old are our meters now, and any idea of what amount of money we would save by upgrading the meters, both in actually capturing the real water usage and then also in manpower reading the meters?
I can speak to a little bit of it. I believe the meters were put in the early 90s. Dan can correct me if I'm wrong. As far as, water meters go, it's a mechanical device, so they slow down over time. So financial analysis has not been done as far as, what's the payback, what's a payback period. When I brought this to the council before, didn't seem like there was any interest going forward, so haven't really done any further work on that. But I'm sure in the AWWA standards, there's a payback.
Like 5%, 3%, 10%?
I don't like to put a number on it. I don't put a number out there and it's not right, and then kind of eat crow on it. So I would prefer to defer on that answer till I had a more solid number.
And then what about reading the meters? How much is saved reading the meters, manpower wise?
So as far as reading the meter, we won't physically, a new system you wouldn't require physical reading because the reads are sent to us electronically. But there is still service work that needs to be done. The batteries fall asleep. They need to be woken up, if you will, for lack of better terms. The wires get cut, things of that nature. So there's still some service work that's required with that, but it wouldn't require 3 full-time meter readers, and we could move those meter readers into our field operations. But there's still a lot of significant work that goes along with it. Some of the other benefits too is like for a final read. They don't have to call and schedule, okay, we're 2 weeks out for your final read. We can give you that final read at that phone call because we have that read right
Real
now.
time.
So there's a lot of,
Yeah.
customer service friendly things that are important to people, right? So, leaks, I got a leak, same type of thing. You can show them how to see if it's leaking on an app, or they can, get alerts on their phones, much like you can do with a DT app with energy use and things of that nature.
So it's more user friendly for the customer.
In my opinion, yes.
All right, thank you.
If I can just add a comment too. I'm not an engineer by any means, so just want to qualify that. Based on my understanding, normally what happens is, Mr. John Selmy mentioned the meters slow down. And what happens is if someone's using X amount of gallons, it actually reads a smaller usage. So therefore, it likely results in the city having a bigger water loss. And what that means is you purchase more units from DUA versus selling, even though you're actually selling it, but you really don't know about it because the meter is not capturing all of it. And on page 2 of the template, under model assumptions, the very first one shows the water loss, the historical water loss. And in 2019, you had 14.7% water loss for the system. So there was a difference between what you purchased and what you sold. Now, that doesn't mean it goes down to 0 because you have new water meters. There is just overall leakage through the pipes, so that you can't usually eliminate that to 0. But there's very likely a component of it because of the water meters.
And the new meters, if we got them, would you be able to separate out water and sewage usage? Like, in other words, water coming in and then water
No.
going out, and or no?
No. It would still take the read. I mean,
That'd be nice.
our sewage
That'd be
bills
nice.
our sewage bills are based on our water purchase. So that's not enough.
If somebody waters their grass or washes their car, they're paying for the water to go down the sewer, even though it's not. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm all done.
So,
Okay, I think I'm next.
Yep.
Okay, now, Has there been any grant money given to us on any of these projects, including the lead pipe replacement, or did we get zero money from anybody?
There is no grant money that I'm aware of for the CSO projects. The monies that are available for the lead service line are the same thing. That would be a loan through the state. There is some talk about some other funding sources coming to the state to do that, but there's no grant money. The only thing there may be is if the community was determined to be disadvantaged, that there may be some loan forgiveness. But that's all I'm aware of.
Yeah, I can't believe with these projects, especially the lead pipe and the water meters. These are projects. Flint did the lead pipe. I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure they got some kind of help. There's got to be something out there for us. I mean, not to get one penny from the state or the federal government to help us with these, $30 million projects. We have to fund every penny ourselves. It just doesn't seem right. It seems like there should be something out there. I mean, we need to do. I mean, as we exhausted every resource possible, I mean that should be a full-time job for somebody.
Well, it's called the Dwarf. It's a drinking water revolving fund. It's administered by the state, and I've looked into it. We can apply. They only fund so many projects a year. They're funded through 21, and they're taking applications for 22. I've reached out to a couple people there to find out about the lead program. If there's some funding there, but it's not free money. This is a rule that was created by Eagle, and basically the position was that it's to be funded with rates.
Okay, well, I think we should keep digging. I mean,
I don't disagree. I mean, but that's what I know.
Well, we should get our firefighter grant writer getting going on it. And anyway, Martin, you said that you're projecting with this bond issue, roughly 6% rate increases every year for the next several years. Does that include the 6%? Does that include the annual normal increases of, like you say, 4 to 5, 6%? Or are we looking at 10% plus each year?
No, that's the total increase. So 6.9%.
That's with the projected normal increases from our water rates, or what we charge for water?
It's inclusive of everything, yes.
Okay.
And that's including, so the 6.9%, just to clarify, it includes every project and bonding for the full amount of the main projects, the $25 million roughly. And by the way, go ahead. Sorry.
Does that include the projected or estimated yearly increase from our water costs?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And
thanks.
I did verify, I believe someone asked me this, what the rates were projecting last year to be the increases for this year. I did verify during the meeting and it was 6.51%. So, and this is showing 6.91. So it's very close to last year's model.
Okay, so the previous model was with the bond, right?
It was with the bond, but it was not the exact calculation because we did not have that at that time.
All right, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
We have Councilman Bazey, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have two questions. The first one, okay, with the water meter replacement, what constitutes a water meter replacement with the date-wise? So we have some homes, not a lot, but there's few homes in the city that were built in certain date. So are you replacing the water meters on all the homes, or is it specific water meters built from this date prior to that certain date? I guess that's one question.
Sure. So that's a good question. So it would depend on the manufacturer that was selected. Currently, the city uses a Neptune meter. So if the city puts this out to bid and the Neptune company was the low bidder, what my recommendation would be that any meter less than 10 years old, we would just change out the head and to be compatible with the new reading device. I did that in a prior community, and which helped us save significant money, because over time we do change meters because they slow down, they stop, they freeze, whatever the reasons are, and new construction for sure. So that would be a big consideration. If we went to a different vendor that wasn't our current vendor, then we would probably have to change every one of them. So when we met with the vendors, there was, a pretty substantial savings there with meters that had already been installed in the city that are less than 10 years old. So that would be something that would be taken into consideration when and if the city wants to go out to bid, and then how we award the contract.
Okay, thank you. The last question, goes on the water meters also. So I do remember, Mr. Selmy, you did bring it up in front of us, and I remember seeing the bids from the vendors for the different water meters. Again, my biggest concern will be with the water meters from an engineering point of view, is to to choose water meters with something that they can be tamper-proof, even if you mentioned the word disconnect earlier. So I don't know why they would be disconnected. They shouldn't be for any reason why a resident will disconnect it, other than a city to disconnect something like that. Especially, if you disconnect it, then the water meter, the water should not be flowing into the house, right? So
Right.
I was concerned when you mentioned the word disconnect. So, and that's one of the biggest things for somebody to bypass the water meter and goes directly, without like charging residents. And I'm sure that's one of the biggest concerns for the city, is to make sure that there's nobody's going to tamper or bypass the water meter and basically use free water on somebody else's expense.
So
Can you comment on that?
that's a very valid point. So these new systems, they have alarms built into them. So if the meter gets turned around, there's a reverse flow alarm that's emailed to the city. If there's no usage over a certain period of time, there's an alarm sent. If the meter's been removed, there's an alarm that's sent to the city. So in real time, at least within 24 hours, we know that. Way we read now, every 60 days, somebody could have their meter out for 60 days before we would ever, realize that, So there are a lot of benefits with the program. Obviously, the technology and information has come a long ways in the last 25, 30 years in metering technology.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yeah,
For me?
Oh, testing, 1, 2. That's testing.
yeah.
No, I was done with my questions. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Councilwoman Hicks Clayton. And I ask in the future, if you raise your hand and it goes down, don't put it up a second time, because it just adds you to the list again.
Okay. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sorry about that. I muted myself just for the record because it was kind of noisy. Thank you, Madam Chair. It was noisy. You could hear all the cars. I didn't want you to have to listen to all that noise. So I have a couple questions regarding the meters themselves. So these are Neptune brand, correct?
Currently, that's what the city uses, yes.
Okay. Do you have the projected longevity of the meters for the new meters, and upkeep on costs and return on investment for those meters?
Yep. So the return on the investment, I don't have at the tip of my fingers. If the city decides to go forward, then we certainly can get those numbers from the vendors. The meter life would be the same, about 30 years. The one thing that is important to note, though, so the batteries themselves are guaranteed for 20 years, prorated after 10 years. So the first 10 years, the batteries are replaced at the manufacturer's cost. So my past experience is that when we did that program, that we put a few cents in the rate every year to fund for batteries going forward. So when they do get past that 10-year and you're prorated, that you have funding already there, pre-funded to do replacements as needed. The other key to that is, like, we don't want to do 20,000 meters all at once either, because we don't want 20,000 batteries all dying at the same time too. So That is important.
Okay, very good. And I just want to circle back. Scenario number 1, which includes the CSO projects and the meters, we're looking at 6.93%, and that does include the Great Lakes Water Authority 4 to 5%. That
Yes.
is correct. It's all inclusive.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
And Rouge Valley and Dua.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, it includes basically all operating cost increases, all salary increases, all inflationary increases, as well as the projects that are specified.
All capital investment projects.
Correct.
Right. Okay, that was on page 7, I think. All right, thank you.
The big difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2 and 4, honestly, is the level of bonding that you would do. It's 25.7 million in total versus the 16.6 million, which the difference is the water meters.
Okay. Right. Between scenario 1 and scenario 4, that's the difference. One's
Correct.
with meters, one's without.
Yeah, the scenario 2 has water meters, but that would be funded through the cash that you already have, and
Except
you would
for
end
the
up running out of cash as
Yeah.
a result.
We'd have a problem there. Yep, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bella?
I just wanted to point out, Council Chair, for our fellow council members, and just to clarify it, based on following the interest rates for years and years and years in my business, to get right now, depends on which particular scenario we go with, but anywhere between 26 million almost, all the way down to 16 million at 2.5% interest rate for 20 years is, I'm telling you, it's like stealing money. There's no such thing that will come up like that again. And the likelihood of a rate like that being, nobody can project the future. I could just base it on history of a rate like that being available to us next year is pretty slim. And then you got scenario 3, which residents pay for through the bills. I think, to me, is, in my opinion, not a good idea, because just too much of an amount to have it passed on to the residents in their bills every single year. It's much better to be able to borrow that at that 2.5% interest rates, would, again, will not be available again, and is basically like stealing money. I can't believe that we're even able to get something like that. I assume, Martin, it's a fixed rate, correct?
I believe it is a fixed, yeah, actually it is a fixed rate based on the bond council. I did want to add one comment about bonding versus paying from cash for operations for capital improvements. There's different schools of thought. I know that, for example, like myself, if I'm my personal finances, I want to pay off the debt as quickly as possible. So like mortgage, things like that. I don't want to have it sitting. Here, one, it's 2.5% interest, so it is very low in comparison to prior years and what's available normally.
Right.
The other thing to really think about, it is over 20 years, and these capital improvements are not benefiting the people that have essentially paid their water bills over the last 10 or 20 years, and that's how the cash balance has been put into the water and sewer fund. These improvements are going to benefit people that are going to be living in the community for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And when you bond for something like that, you're really spreading the cost to the user of these assets down the road. So if you were going to spend the cash now and someone moves out of the city in 2 years and someone else comes in 2 years, that new resident didn't really pay for these improvements, even though they're going to benefit from the new water and sewer meter, from some of the CSO projects, things like that. So spreading the cost out into the future really spreads the cost out to the user themselves versus kind of front loading it to the people that live in the city currently, if that makes sense.
Yes.
The public comment. Please limit it to 3.
Council Chair, you may want to start from the beginning because you were muted.
Oh, okay. No, all right. We'll open it up to public comment. State your name and please limit it to 3 minutes. Any public comment in regards to the study session? I have a DBM 48. Go ahead, please. Can somebody unmute her? Him? I'm not sure.
There we go.
Okay. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. DBN 48.
I see a box, but no video.
They did raise their hand. Well, then I guess we'll go on. They're not responding. Okay, anyone else with any comment? I don't see anything. This time, I guess it concludes our, Councilman Constant, are you
Yeah,
doing public comment?
just a question for Martin and or anyone else. The CPI now has been, less than 2.5%. Any idea on where it's going in the future? I mean, inflation's been very low. We're going to head into a big recession, probably in large part due to the pandemic and the lockdown. So I don't see interest rates going up. But I just wondered if you had any projections or thoughts on that, Martin.
I don't have, I guess, full projections or anything like that. I know that the Fed has been actually focused on increasing inflation, as funny as it sounds, because the thought process for by the Feds is that a certain level of inflation is healthy for any country, and inflation has been at historical lows for the last, I believe, a couple of years. So there is a focus on that. The last time I actually read an article a couple of days ago, it was reading that it's looking like it's becoming more successful at hopefully increasing inflation. I don't know what that level is going to be, but I would expect that we're going to see 2 to 3% at a minimum in the next year or two. But again, is the policy going to be successful in what the Feds are trying to do and actually increase inflation or not? I think a lot depends also on the presidential election in the next 45 days or so. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, but I would say that I would be surprised to see huge numbers for inflation in the very near future, but that could change pretty quickly.
All right, yeah, that's what I was looking for. So you think at most 2 or 3% rate of inflation, 2 or 3% CPI?
I would expect that, but honestly, it's so hard to predict. I know the interest rates, the interest expense, it's historical lows, and I'd be surprised to see anything much lower. I mean, I can't see the banks actually giving us money to borrow money, but it's almost as close to that at this point. So the rates are insanely low, and I would encourage anybody that has a mortgage to refinance as quickly as possible too.
Right. Thank you.
I have DBN 48 raise their hand again. Go ahead, state your name, and you have 3 minutes. DBN 48. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Is Councilman Muscat, you had this problem. How did you fix that?
Yeah, and that is, I know him. Mohammed, just shake your head. Go down to your bottom of your screen where it says mute and stop video on the lower left-hand corner. Go pick, there's a little up arrow by the mute, and change your speaker configuration. Pick one like a Real Tech or microphone Real Tech. You may have to pick a different one now. It's still not working. No, not that one.
Council Chair, maybe as a consideration, maybe you could have him call via phone. So this way that, maybe that.
You want to call my phone number? Hamoudi, just call my number. We can see if we can put you on speakerphone. Okay, you're on speakerphone, Mr. Janney.
Thank you, Councilman Muscat, for doing Go back to the beginning of this council meeting. I don't know what the heck I got. Hold on, let me lower my speaker here. I want to go back to the beginning of this meeting when Councilman Abdullah was asking the question about the reduction to the residents of Dearborn Heights, the 10%. And to be quite frank with you, as the resident of Dearborn Heights for the last 15 years, I wasn't very happy with the dialogue between Councilman Abdullah and the mayor. There was no solution regarding the 10% on how to fix the motion being unclear, which blows my mind, because how can the city council vote on a motion and it become unclear? And as Councilman Abdullah had mentioned, there is no follow-up. So I want to go back to that and ask once again, is there going to be the reduction since it was agreed upon by the council? And when is it going to take effect? And who's going to take care of it? And who's going to be responsible for it from today going forward? Don't everybody answer at the same time.
I wish I could answer that, but I can't.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
I guess the mayor wants to chime in. I believe he's got his hand raised.
Yep.
Mr.
Mayor.
Council.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
I would direct that question to Martin. If you put a 10% reduction in the model, would that then mean that we are now looking at double digits, 17%, 16.9% increases?
The model, so if you reduce the expenses by 3.2 million roughly, and I mean in total for a 5-year period, it reduces the increase by 1%. So in order to do a water and sewer rate decrease in the rates, you would have to do roughly, you have to cut about $21 million out of the budget for the 5-year period. If you don't, you would be running out of money pretty fast, and you would have to do significant increases in the future. So the model, the way the city has looked at it is to do as minimal increases as possible, given the DUA water charges, the sewage disposal charges, with the capital outlay, things like that, in order to not have double-digit increases in the future. And when I say double-digit, if you had a decrease in 1 year, I forget the models that were shared with the council a couple years ago, probably about 18 months ago. You would likely have 40 or 50% increases in a couple of years, trying to catch up and trying to get the fund out of a hole, essentially.
Well, again, let me add to my concerns. There was also a short discussion regarding the absoluteness of getting these new water meters, and other than coming to the 21st century and coming a little more digital, I didn't hear an absolute need for this expenditure to the residents. I'm sorry, our 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever percentage of the water meters throughout the community, throughout the city of Dearborn Heights, are they not working? Is that why we're looking to spend this money? What's the purpose of spending the money other than getting caught up? And I understand the one gentleman who says it's good customer service, it's going to bring us up to the digital days and so on. None of that really details that we need it. What is are the water meters not working? Is that why this is on the table, or this is just the free maintenance fee?
I'll have to defer to, I believe, John Stelmy on that question. I wasn't sure if that question was to me or not.
Can someone unmute John Selmy?
Okay,
You're on mute.
so All right, thank you. So
So I just to recap, I got two questions. Why is it 10% on there? And do we absolutely need these things to bring us up to the 21st century or whatever it is that is being presented to the residents of Dearborn Heights? Where's the 10% and do we really need them?
all right, so it's hard to hear you, so I don't know what your 10% question was. The meters that the city has, they're aging of 30 years old. You buy a commodity, you sell the commodity, and when you can't register the commodity accurate on what you're buying, you're seeing water losses upwards of 15%. So you're absorbing that cost. The water meters don't last forever. The equipment that the city is using to read the meters is being bought secondhand over the internet. We don't even have a vendor that produces this equipment anymore. So, I mean, the city doesn't have to do anything. But at some point, though, when you can't read your meters, you got a problem. So either start to recognize that you have a problem now, you have an opportunity to fund it through a bond with the interest rate that is very low, or you start pre-funding it and doing it years out. At some point, you've got to upgrade your infrastructure. If I buy 100 gallons of water from the Great Lakes Water Authority, and I don't know what I sold today, I don't know that you're going to stay in business very long.
Well, trust me, I'm a resident who has got hit pretty hard with a $1,440 water bill for a 2-month period. My money has been invested. So if this is going to reduce my water bill and get that 10% that was already voted on and passed, we're talking. But if you're telling me I'm not going to reap the benefits of this, which I'm not hearing that I'm going to, I'm not understanding it. And I'm a businessman.
Yep. Well, if you buy the water and we sell it and we don't accurately measure all the water that we sell, you're ultimately paying for it. Every user is ultimately paying for that water. That 15% or 14% that's unaccounted goes right back into the rates. Somebody's going to pay for it. You need to have an accurate meter. Mine is just a recommendation. What the council wants to do with it is what the council will do with it. At some point, you got to start thinking about it. This is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon.
Okay, is there any more comments from the public? We are getting towards the end of our meeting and we're running short of time here. Any more public?
Was my question answered regarding the 10%? Is that coming back to the consumer or is it not? I don't think that was answered.
I don't know what you speak about the 10%. That's, I think
Martin
answered the question about the 10%. If you reduce the rate 10%, you're going to have to raise it 20%. So I don't know what
I think that's something council.
Speak to that.
I think council's going to have to take that up as a complete body, along with Mr. Mayor and Plant Moran. Something we'll have to look at. And as far as the new water meters, I'm going to agree a little bit with Mr. Selmy, because our water meters do produce X percentage amount of water loss that everyone is starting to pay for at a 14% water loss every year. And I think we were as high as 18 or 20% there for a while. And some meters have been replaced, so it's cut back a little bit. So we got to sharpen our pencils.
Okay, at this time, it looks like we have no more public comment. I'm going to give everybody a 10-minute break. The time is 6:56. Come back approximately 7:05.